get her seat.
I know.
Did Kate text her to tell her she needs to sit in the front corner?
Listen, you're her boss, not me.
I can't.
You're my boss, so what the hell am I doing?
I can't.
See, that's why. So you know I actually listen to you. That's why I'm a good subordinate, right? I follow orders.
Well, you know, you're a good FBI agent. Interesting. This is so bizarre.
It's really weird, isn't it?
And welcome to News Now from Fox. We have full coverage coming up for you, showing you all of these live looks ahead of President Biden's historic address to Congress. He's going to be giving this primetime address to a joint session of Congress, marking the biggest speech of his presidency so far and giving him the opportunity to lay out his agenda for the rest of his time in office. You can see right there House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Vice President Kamala Harris. Historic shots coming in right now of members of Congress. Biden's address also comes on the eve of his 100th day in office, giving him the chance to reflect on what's been a busy few months, including a coronavirus stimulus, a spending plan that he proposed, and partisan battles over immigration. This is going to be a big night tonight, a lot to see, a lot to hear. So let's listen in as to what's going on with congressmen and women as they await the president's address. So tonight it's going to be me and my colleague Andrew Kraft. Andrew, thank you so much for being with me tonight. It's about 5:42 here in Phoenix, Arizona. In a little more than 15 minutes, we will be taking everything full and listening in to President Biden.
Yeah, Daytona, that's right. The image that struck out to me just off the bat from seeing these very first scenes is Speaker Pelosi and Vice President Harris. It's the first time in history for a speech like this where two women will be behind the president speaking, and so quite historic.
Yeah, and we're going to have a little bit of experts coming in to give us a better idea of what to expect for tonight. We're going to bring in Kevin Walling. Kevin, do you have us right here on News Now?
Hey, Daytona, good to be with you.
Hi, so good to be with you. Let's go back out to some of these really beautiful pictures coming in from the shots of Fox News that we have. We saw House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. We saw Vice President Kamala Harris, Bernie Sanders right there. Are you as excited as us for tonight?
I am. I mean, this is, if you love politics, if you love, civics, this is your night. And to Andrew's point, it is so significant. We're seeing this right now in the live footage from Fox to see the first female vice president of the United States. And of course, Speaker Pelosi. She has sat behind four presidents up to this point. Joe Biden will be her fourth as speaker. But it is very significant to see two women for the first time in the history of this country sitting behind the president of the United States. Of course, you see Jack Reed there, the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. It's a very small, obviously limited in size, 200 or so guests. So you don't see the normal array of senior officers. You normally see all the Joint Chiefs. Now we just have the chairman who's there. Ted Cruz, obviously there, one of the thorns in the president's side. On the floor, you saw some of the Republicans, senior Republicans up in the gallery as well. But it's certainly an interesting kind of view with this limited crowd that we're seeing right now in these live shots.
And Kevin, this is Andrew here, and like you've been saying, this is so fun just to see all the interactions on the floor, who's speaking to who's not speaking to who. But like you were saying, this is very pared down because of coronavirus pandemic restrictions. About 200 people will be in attendance. No doubt in speeches like this. It's usually the full Senate and the full Congress. But let's go into the distinctions. This is not a State of the Union where there is a line, in the Constitution that says the executive shall update the legislative on what's going on. And so kind of give us a sense of why these two speeches are different.
Yeah, it's a great question, Andrew. This is what is known as a joint address to Congress. Every time the president speaks in that first kind of address to Congress, it's called that. And then in the later three addresses before Congress, it's a State of the Union. And to your point, Andrew, usually these play out in the first term of a new administration, either in January or February. It was originally scheduled earlier in February, but with COVID-19, obviously, and with the insurrection at the Capitol earlier in January, leadership worked with the administration to push this date back. And I think it's significant, obviously, as you and Daytona report, that we hit the 100-day mark tomorrow. The president will travel both to Pennsylvania this week, to Georgia this week, kind of as a capturing kind of the momentum coming out of the speech to continue to sell what he's going to be talking about in his address tonight. This is above the rostrum right here that you're seeing limited members of the press. You see some working on laptops. You see some with binoculars to look down at their members to capture, Andrew, to your point, the kind of side conversations that are playing it out. It really makes for interesting kind of bedfellows. You see Dick Durbin, the leadership team, Chuck Schumer, the majority leader, Rosa DeLauro in the dress behind him, the chairwoman of the Appropriations Committee. But again, Andrew, to your point, it is so significant to see these two women for the first time in the history of this country behind the president in this rostrum.
And Kevin, let's talk about the speech itself. We've gotten some bits, some excerpts about what will be said. President Biden, not known for speaking at length, and so we are anticipating a somewhat abbreviated, shorter speech than presidents of the past, but no doubt he'll be touting some of those accomplishments. What won't he be talking about? Because, as you know, there are some issues that they have shied away from, that they don't want to talk about it, the border being one of them.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think it will be a shorter speech from what we see in the past. Now they're kind of going through some of the housekeeping of the speech. Obviously, Kamala Harris, the vice president, is the president of the Senate. So there's some kind of ritual aspects of what they all need to say, and then the speaker will speak next. But to your point, Andrew, I think the president is going to touch on a whole host of issues, including immigration, because I think that is one of the things that you've seen this administration out of the gate somewhat struggle with in terms of messaging, and be hit pretty hard in terms of the media with the crisis that we're seeing play out at the border. You're going to see him push for the comprehensive immigration package that was put out by the White House a few weeks ago. I think you're also going to see him really speak on the issue of police reform. It'll be interesting to see Tim Scott, United States Senator from South Carolina, Republican, will be delivering the Republican response to this address. He has spent a lot of time working on that issue, so I think you'll see him also speak to that issue. So I think it's going to actually be all-encompassing. I don't know, in terms of the previews that I've had with administration officials, that they really don't want to duck any of these issues. I think they're going to take a lot of these issues head on.
And we just want to formally introduce Kevin Walling. He's a Democratic strategist. This is your first time on camera, or we brought you on for a second before. We wanted to show all these live pictures and sounds, but thank you so much for being with us here. And as a Democratic strategist, what is the strategy for President Biden going into tonight? Like, what does preparation look like for such a big address?
Yeah, so in calls I've had with the administration kind of previewing this speech tonight, they've really talked about the president really being invested and really being hands-on, up to a few hours ago, even minutes ago, changing parts of the speech. So you saw photos from the White House working in the Oval Office on this speech. Previous administrations have released a lot of that same content because they want to show the president is in charge and really crafting the message, which I think we'll see play out in just 10 minutes from now. A president that really wants to talk about America rebounding, America back on track. 200 million shots in arms that the president and administration officials have been touting. Obviously, the rescue package that still enjoys a wide amount of support among the American people. And I think you're going to want to see him take some of that motivation, that majority support on some of those issues, and rally support behind his new jobs plan that talks about infrastructure, his family's plan that he's really going to spend time talking about tonight, and really kind of pivot now past this 100-day mark, past a lot of the COVID crisis that he inherited, and really rebound into the future. You're seeing two Massachusetts members, Elizabeth Warren, Ed Markey right there, speaking with Chris Van Hollen, senator from Maryland, of the progressive wing. Those three really represent some of the stronger progressives in the United States Senate. Again, to Andrew's point, it's always fun to see the kind of conversation that plays out beforehand. Unfortunately, again, with that mostly empty chamber, we're seeing a little bit less than that. But it is also incredible to see these two women leading this nation behind that rostrum. They met back in 2004, I think was the first time they met in person. Now, who could have imagined that they would be there? It's one of the newest members, Senator Raphael Warnock of Georgia, who helped flip the United States Senate to Democratic control in that runoff election in Georgia with his colleague, John Ossoff. So again, it's just, to Andrew's point and to your point, Daytona, it's a really fun night just to observe all these kind of conversations that are happening behind the scenes.
And Kevin, Andrew here, let's kind of put on our amateur presidential historian hats, because the 100-day mile marker, for the last half century has always been this wayward point in administrations, especially in first terms. What has gotten done, what has not gotten done. It is somewhat of an arbitrary milestone, because they obviously have 4 years to fulfill these promises or not to. And so what has Biden kept? What promises has he kept? What promises has he not kept?
So I think we may have lost Kevin there. Kevin, do you have us?
I'm back. Yeah. Do you have me?
Yeah, we have you now.
Okay. Excellent.
Did you hear Andrew's question?
No, I didn't. Daytona, can you say it again?
I can repeat the question, Kevin.
Sure.
I wanted us to kind of put on our amateur presidential historian hats for a little bit, because the 100-day mile marker for the last half century has been this kind of wayward point in which administrations kind of tally up their accomplishments. What have they gotten done that they said they were going to get done, and vice versa? What have they not gotten done yet that they said they were going to? And so kind of let's go into some of those promises made and promises maybe not kept.
Yeah, so it's a great question, Andrew, and it is an important mile marker, in the last 50 years of how you kind of judge the honeymoon period of each first administration. I think this president and administration obviously has been focused like a laser on dealing with COVID-19, dealing with the crisis at hand, obviously focusing on getting those shots in arms, supply chain management, getting those vaccines out. That's something the president really focused on as part of this originally promising 100 million shots. He's doubled that. So that's certainly a success. And of course, through a lot of these executive actions in the first couple of weeks, and even more recently in guns, keeping some of those promises made during the campaign to fulfillment. But again, a lot of those things, as we know, Andrew, can be reversed with the next administration. So look for this president to really focus on what Congress can do, which is obviously much more foundational to what it is that will stand the test of time. Douglas Emhoff, the second gentleman, is entering the gallery up there. Wife of Vice President Kamala Harris just entered the gallery. He's a lawyer as well as the vice president, now teaching a few courses at Georgetown University. It's kind of funny to see him up there by himself. Looks a little bit lonely, unfortunately. Usually that gallery, as you know, Daytona and Andrew, is packed with guests of the First Lady and previously second ladies. And of course, now this is the first time we're seeing the second gentleman giving a nice motion to his wife. It's got to be an incredibly proud moment for him.
Yeah, wife's doing big things, right?
His wife. Yeah, exactly.
I'm curious what your thoughts are on the invitations that were sent out, the people who are inside and the people who are not inside right now witnessing this.
Yeah, it's a good question, Daytona. Speaker Pelosi controls the chamber because it is the House of Representatives. So she empowered her leadership team. I think there's 60 members of the House, both Democrats, Republicans, 30 members of the Senate, Democrats and Republicans, gave those seats to her counterpart, Kevin McCarthy, to decide. Obviously, the judicial branch represented by just one sole justice, the Chief Justice, John Roberts, appointed by George W. Bush, who will be representing the judiciary. Usually that's either 7, 8, 9 justices. Of course, this is the first time that we won't be seeing Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Unfortunately, she had attended many of President Trump's State of the Unions because of the importance of this night and showing that we are Americans first. So he obviously is representing the judiciary. But again, it's a limited crowd, to your point, Daytona. Not the normal kind of pomp and circumstance, not the normal guests invited by the First Lady, but a really limited number of members of Congress and just 2 cabinet members, the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of State will be in attendance as well.
And Kevin, we just saw Chief Justice John Roberts there walk into the chamber, and like you said, he'll be the only member of the High Court represented in the chamber tonight. But you're in D.C., Kevin, and before this speech, we have been reading that so many people have been jockeying for invitations because it was the hottest ticket in town tonight, obviously because everyone was not able to be in the chamber all at once. And so, but let's talk about Biden's agenda, what he's done. Let's kind of make the conversation a little bit go back there. We're looking at First Lady Jill Biden at the moment walking into the gallery.
Absolutely. So again, to your point, Andrew, I think that the president is really going to say that America is on the rebound, going to focus a lot of attention on that rescue package. For example, one of the provisions is child nutrition. So cutting child poverty, for example, in half. Direct payments to state and local governments to continue to employ teachers, firefighters, police officers. So assistance to the states. There's direct checks that were so popular with the American people. And I think he's going to also tout the fact that in these first 100 days, we saw the largest number of job growth than any other presidential administration in history. We saw the largest growth in the stock market in these last 100 days in terms of modern history comparisons to other presidents. So he has a lot, I think, to tout in terms of the records that he has set so far in these first 100 days. But again, this speech has got to be forward-looking, and he's got to make the case to the American people that we got through these first 100 days. Knock on wood, we're coming out of this both health crisis and economic crisis. But what's next for the American people?
And as you know, Kevin, in the first, I believe, week after Joe Biden was sworn in as president, there was just a flurry of executive actions, a lot of them overturning previous actions that former President Trump had done. But now he's speaking in front of Congress, and we've seen overtures to work with members on the opposite side of the aisle on the infrastructure proposal that has been put forth, on other things. Will he kind of make that overture again in trying to work with the other side of the aisle? He's no novice to working in the Senate.
Yeah, Andrew, it's a great point. Of course, the president spent 30 years in the United States, 8 years as vice president, as president of the Senate. In conversations that I have with senior administration folks, you're seeing a lot of things play out behind the scenes. So Steve Ricchetti, who's a senior counselor to the president, has regular phone calls with leadership in the House and the Senate, as does Ron Klain, as does Cedric Richmond. All of the leadership team, you saw the president's first sit down with lawmakers in the Oval Office, was 12 Republican senators, some of his former colleagues from the Senate. And I know there's conversations that are playing out behind the scenes with regards to infrastructure. Debbie Dingell right there in the white is a congresswoman from Michigan. She's going to have an important role when it comes to this infrastructure bill, representing a lot of car-making communities in Michigan. So those kind of conversations, same as Sherrod Brown right there, Bob Casey, Jeanne Shaheen from New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, Ohio. Those are the 3 key states, along with Michigan, that flipped the presidency back to the Democratic column this past election cycle. So obviously infrastructure is going to be key. I think you're going to see a president who will negotiate across party lines. You saw Republicans come forward with a proposal, and that's where the rubber hits the road, so to speak, in terms of these negotiations that'll play out.
And it does look like we are just under a minute out from the address. Hopefully President Biden is on time for this one. He has a lot of people waiting for him right now, including his wife, First Lady Jill Biden, right there. Lots of procedures about to be taken, and it will definitely be interesting. Kevin, if he starts walking out, we just want to thank you so much for joining us here to kind of preview what we are going to be expecting. Not exactly sure how long it's going to run. What is your expectation? What's your prediction?
I think it'll certainly, Daytona, be under an hour. Of course, a lot of the time spent during these addresses is interrupted by applause on one side of the aisle standing up and one side of the aisle sitting down. I don't see that really playing out. So it's going to be kind of an interesting feel to this speech where you're not going to see those massive amounts of applause. I think you'll see some muted applause from both sides, especially when it comes to issues like the military. That is a unifying issue in our country. But it's certainly, I think, I would be surprised if it went on beyond 40, 45 minutes or so.
And of course, we will air the speech live. We'll also air the rebuttal by Republican Senator of South Carolina, Tim Scott, right after the fact. And there is Steny Hoyer walking into the chamber right now. And we'll have all post-speech analysis as well right after the rebuttal by Senator Scott, breaking down what was said and analyzing that. And you're seeing some of these House members and the Democratic leadership come into the chamber. Minority Leader McCarthy there. We did just see a couple minutes ago those members of the cabinet you were speaking of, Kevin, Secretary of State Blinken and Secretary of Defense Austin.
Yeah, it's so funny, Andrew, to your point. Members in previous years would come to the floor hours before the speech to scope out those seats on the aisle just so they could get into the picture with the president for their constituents back home to see them live on television, because this is such a watch speech. So it's kind of such an interesting scenario to see how empty this chamber is with, Andrew, to your point, with the House and Senate leadership coming in now. And we're seeing Senate leadership, Dick Durbin, Pat Leahy, of course, a well-known name, Bernie Sanders, Senator Debbie Stabenow in the Green from Michigan coming in. So this is the Senate. The House just came in, to Andrew's point, Amy Klobuchar, who ran against Joe Biden, of course, in the primary, and the Majority Leader and Minority Leader, Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like you said, Kevin, we'll also be monitoring his movements tomorrow. He'll be traveling. President Biden will be traveling. He'll be traveling to Atlanta, Georgia, to speak with former President Carter and former First Lady Rosalynn Carter.
Exactly, and to keep touting some of the things that he's going to talk about tonight, especially when it comes to the American Families Plan, with childhood education, with free college tuition, with child tax credits, all those kinds of things. I think that's going to be a major part of his speech tomorrow in Metro Atlanta. And then, of course, I think he's scheduled to go to Pittsburgh soon after that, again, to these kind of key states that were key both electorally and key to getting support behind these landmark pieces of legislation.
And we're just taking in the scenes and the sights there in the House chamber a little after 9 p.m. in the nation's capital. Taking a live look, Vice President Kamala Harris, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, to a point we have mentioned multiple times, but worth reiterating, that never in American history have two women sat behind the rostrum there, behind the president while he gives a speech. It's quite historic, no matter what party you may be affiliated with.
And two Californians too, Andrew. To that point, we haven't seen that where two members from the same delegation sitting behind there. I don't think in recent memory we've seen that either.
And just about 3 minutes late, a little over 3 minutes late for President Biden. I know that you said, Kevin, that he was making a few changes, few edits to his speech, but could it be that he is still making a few edits to his speech?
Daytona, it could be. I think he's one for maybe some drama, some flair. Here come the doors back open again, and the announcement from the Sergeant of Arms, and it looks like we're going to get the process started right here. There he is.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and take this full. Thank you so much again, Kevin Walling, a Democratic strategist, for being on News Now. We'll talk to you soon.
Great. Thanks, Daytona. Thanks, Andrew.
Like we said, let's listen in to all of the sights and sounds as the president steps forward for this historic address to Congress.